Thank you very much for that introduction. If you've read the bios in the brochure that was handed out to you, you'll already know a little bit about all of us up here. I moved to Saskatchewan from Ontario last year. And while I was in Ontario, I worked for public health. And of course, if you know anything about public health, they're all about making everybody healthier. So at our conferences, what we would do is instead of sitting and clapping, everybody had to stand up and clap. So just a little experiment. We had some fabulous presentations this morning. I thought we would start out with an active applause, as we called it, for all those presenters we had this morning. So on your feet and clap. All right. Thank you. All right, look at ladies, you already had a standing ovation. Pretty good, eh? All right, as John mentioned, I am the project manager for the Saskatoon North Partnership for Growth, or as we like to call ourselves, P4G. There will be a test at the end for all the acronyms, because there are a fair few in our presentation. My name is Gutmann, and with me today is Dana Kripki. She is a senior planner with the City of Saskatoon. Dana? And Rebecca Rowe, she is the Director of Planning and Development for the arm of Corman Park, and Rebecca's at the end there. Both of these fine ladies are part of the PAC, or the Planning or Administrative Committee for the Saskatoon North Partnership for Growth, and Dana will be talking a little bit about the different committees that we have for P4G a little bit later in the presentation, so you'll get to know exactly what their roles are. Oh, gotta use a clicker. All right. Quick overview of what we're going to talk about. We'll just go through this very quickly. I've been warned about keeping on time, so we'll try to do that as best we can. We'll just tell you a little bit about who the P4G is, or the Saskatoon North Partnership for Growth. Then we'll go into a little bit of discussion on our history of intermunicipal cooperation. P4G obviously didn't come together overnight, as we've heard this morning. Working with these groups isn't something that happens immediately, it's something that happens over time. And we'll be talking a little bit about that history that we have. And then we'll be talking about our regional plan. We started the project on November 1st, so we're a whole 17 days into our project right now in developing our regional plan, but we'll be talking about the process it took for us to get there. And then, of course, finishing off with some benefits, challenges, and some perspectives from both the urban and rural perspectives. All right, so Saskatoon North Partnership for Growth. So the P4G is a collaborative of 5 municipalities. We have all of our logos up there on the slide. We include the arm of Corman Park, the City of Saskatoon, the City of Martensville, the City of Warman, the Town of Osler, and we also have advisory representation from our Saskatoon Regional Economic Development Authority. We call them SREDA. They're very similar to what the ROC would be here in Regina. We have both administrative and political representation on our committees, and Dana will be talking a lot more detail about these committees as we go through our presentation. This group did come together a number of years ago to work on a number of collaborative projects, but really the relationship between these 5 groups was really formalized earlier this year, and again, we'll be covering that in our presentation. So, Saskatoon North Partnership for Growth, a couple of quick facts. We have 4 urban municipalities and 1 rural municipality. I'll see if my arrows lined up where they should be. Saskatoon is the biggest one, right in the middle there. Saskatoon, in the 2014 population estimates, has a population of about 260,000 people. We also have the cities of Warman and Martensville, just north of the city of Saskatoon. If you're to drive from downtown Saskatoon to downtown Martensville, it'll probably take you about 30-35 minutes. Both of these populations in a 2014 population estimate have populations of about 10,000 people. And then we have the town of Osler, which is just north of the city of Warman there, and it has a population of about 1,500 to 2,000 people in a 2014 population estimate. All of these municipalities are surrounded by the arm of Corman Park. So the arm of Corman Park goes all around us. I'm not quite sure if you can see well on the slide there, but there is a boundary for the P4G area. The arm of Corman Park actually extends outside of the boundaries of P4G, but for the purposes of our regional work, we are focusing on this area here in particular. We have some of the fastest growing municipalities in the country. For example, Warman and Martensville registered a 50% increase in 2011 in their census over the previous census for their population. Based on the population growth we've been seeing, we do anticipate that in 20 years we'll have a population of about 500,000 in our region. So a little bit about the history of our intermunicipal cooperation. And both Dana and Rebecca will be talking about these in much more detail, but I'm just going to introduce them today. Obviously, the regional plan work isn't the first time these groups came together. A good example of some of the intermunicipal work we've been doing is the Corman Park Saskatoon Planning District. This was formed in 1956 and continues to be in existence today, and we've been doing a lot of interesting work around this district. We also have the Planning for Growth Corridor Study, which was completed in 2011, and this was actually a study that was done with the 5 P4G municipalities involved. We also had the 2013 Saskatoon Regional Summit. I believe it was about 1 year ago to the day today that we held our summit in Saskatoon. Very similar format. We like to take credit for this summit being carried in representation of our summit last year. But we had facilitated sessions, and really those have allowed us to carry it forward to where we are today in developing our regional plan. And we have a couple other partnerships that we'll be talking a little bit later on in our presentation as well. So at this time, I'll pass it over to Rebecca, and she will start us off by talking about the Corman Park Saskatoon Planning District.
Let's see, are we on the right? Yes. The city and the arm of Corman Park, like Christine mentioned, have been working together in regional and district planning initiatives since 1956, and that is the time that the first joint bylaw was adopted. The planning district provides opportunities for ongoing discussions about growth and development in the district and beyond, and it provides us with an ability to implement growth plans moving forward. So development in the district is controlled by a jointly adopted district official community plan and zoning bylaw. Our last update to those 2 policy documents took place in 2010. The District Planning Commission provides guidance on development and decision-making within the planning district. This group meets monthly to discuss development control and long-range planning initiatives. The District Planning Commission provides a recommendation to our councils on development applications and long-term planning studies. The District Planning Commission consists of 9 members, 4 of which are appointed by the RM, 4 of which are appointed by the City of Saskatoon, and 1 joint member. Non-voting members consist of both RM and city staff, and we also have representatives from the Saskatoon Health Region and the Ministry of Highways and Infrastructure. So this map provides a little bit of context for our planning district. Unfortunately, I don't have a laser pointer here, but sort of in the middle, you can see kind of a beige-colored area, if you will. That is the City of Saskatoon. The blue dash line that surrounds the city is our planning district boundaries. The boundaries extend approximately 1 to 3 miles. Oh, this one right here? Perfect. So yeah, this blue line around here is the planning district boundary. It has changed over the years in terms of its size and shape, and in 2010 is when the current boundaries were formed. So just for a bit of context, this is Highway 11, sorry I'm really shaky, coming down into the city of Regina here. So some important things, I guess, to consider within the planning district. Some of the reasons that we feel that it's the most important is it facilitates, there's an understanding that there needs to be a balance between lightly serviced rural development and areas within the City of Saskatoon that provide full urban servicing. The city has only recently begun to explore the idea of extending servicing beyond their boundary. They do so in limited forms with some water rights and lines, but for the most part, sanitary sewer and storm water do not extend beyond city boundaries. So this is something that the city has begun to explore, and it's a major policy shift and change for them, but one in which ourselves at the RM and some of the other small urban municipalities are really looking forward to the potential for. Another real benefit, and one that we've seen a lot of increase in this, has been enhanced communications between the 2 municipalities. So for the RM, we find out from the city when they're doing large development expansion plans of new neighborhoods or doing an expansion to their city landfill. It's located down in this area here, and it's obviously bordering up onto the RM, so we have an impact on that. For Corman Park, we released a call for proposals last year on new country residential development that we wanted to see in Corman Park. So we shared the results of our call for proposals with the city to get some feedback early on in the process in that. So administratively, we've had a really good working relationship between the two municipalities, and politically now that enhanced communication has really been a benefit to us. Another thing that's really important is that it provides certainty for the development community. So this allows our region to be competitive and attract more business development. And finally, it does allow for long-term, both rural and urban growth plans to come into place. And you'll see sort of on some of our next slides where the city has identified future land use areas that they would like to grow into. And then that helps sort of have the RM be able to develop in areas that aren't going to be in conflict with city development. So again, here, this is a similar map to before, but this is just our future land use map. So you can see on the screen there's a number of colors. The sort of large one over on the right side of the screen, the yellow there, is designated Saskatoon future growth areas. As well too, we also have some industrial development up here in gray. We've got some pink commercial land use designations down there, and that's the Grasswood Junction area where Gemini Arena is. And then as well too, we've got some multi-parcel country residential development. So the key to this future land use map is that you have to have designation on this map in order to subdivide or rezone your land. So if you're looking to develop a new industrial park, you would go to this map and try and find an area that's gray on it. If you do have that gray designation for industrial development, you would be able then to move on to what we call a comprehensive development review, or a CDR. This CDR is a large-scale planning and engineering study that talks about all types of servicing, land use integration, environmental considerations, and it's really the foundational documents that support a subdivision and rezoning application. If you don't have designation on this future land use map, and I'm sure you can appreciate the amount of white that's in the, on the map, you need to do, or we need to support a concept plan in that area to support some more growth. So after the future land use map was adopted in 2010, we basically broke out the planning district into 6 different areas, and you can sort of see them there on the map. And we decided that we were going to do concept plans within these areas. So we started in 2011, we started hiring consultants to complete these concept plans. And the purpose and intent of them was to really look at future land uses, servicing considerations, environmental considerations, and opportunities and constraints. So basically we wanted to know what the development potential of the lands were and what it's going to take to get us to that place. So we started in the southeast area, in that green area, and then also we moved on to the northwest concept plan, which is in the pink, and then the southwest concept plan, which is in the purple tone. So we did a number of these plans. We worked with First Nations, business community, the landowners, a number of provincial ministries and agencies, and through a variety of open houses, workshops, and really trying to get, what people and the community wanted and envisioned for their areas. Again, talking about development considerations. So one of the key expectations of the concept plans was to provide some changes to the future land use map that I just showed. So the intent was really to fill in the white spaces on the map. However, as we sort of moved on to the projects, or through the projects, we quickly realized that there were a lot of considerations coming into play that were not going to allow us to complete the projects sort of on time and providing the level of information we needed to. And a lot of this was based around servicing and specifically related to a lot of provincial highway uncertainties related to our perimeter highway network. So at that time, with the support of our District Planning Commission, we put the concept plan projects on hold, and we decided to reallocate the funding and the time that would be taking to finish the last 2 concept plans and look more broader and regional in scope. So one of the challenges, especially for the RM, when we put these concept plans on hold, was lost development opportunity within the planning district. We had started the concept plans in 2011. We were 2 years into them, $150,000 into them, and we really had no changes to the future land use map. Now we were starting to look more regional in nature, and we were concerned with the amount of time it was going to take to do a regional plan. So we shared this concern with the City of Saskatoon, and between the two of us, one of the things that we came up with was an interim development strategy in the planning district. So this is a new initiative for us. Over the past year, the two administrations have been working together to come up with an interim development strategy. We're hopeful to have it finalized here by the end of the year and start to implement that into early 2015. We're looking at both textual and mapping changes to our district official community plan and that future land use map that I showed before. And we're looking for balanced growth in the interim before we have the regional plan in place. So how we transition from a rural land use into more of an urban land use. And we are looking at best practices from other jurisdictions and specifically looking at interesting and unique arrangements when it comes to taxes, revenue sharing, and cost sharing as well. So I guess I'll look forward to more to come from us here in the new year on that. So moving a little bit away from the planning district, one of the other things that we started doing when we were undertaking this long-range planning within the planning district is the communities of Corman, Martensville, and Osler to the north of us started experiencing rapid growth. So again, just for context, Martensville, Corman, Osler, this blue line here is the planning district boundary. This is Highway 11 towards PA, and this is Highway 12 up towards Blaine Lake. So as I mentioned, these communities were experiencing large growth pressures. For Corman Park, that meant we just didn't have to deal with the City of Saskatoon and some of their development, and we now had other urban municipalities who were coming to the table and we needed to have conversations with. So in 2010, the 5 municipalities, Corman, Corman Park, Osler, Martensville, and the City of Saskatoon, came together and we partnered and received funding through the province's Planning for Growth funding program. We did a project and we termed this the Planning for Growth Corridor Study, and specifically it looked in the areas between Highway 11 and 12. You can sort of see this red boundary that surrounds it. This was a very high growth corridor, lots of transportation issues, servicing issues, and growth pressures for ourselves. So this study gave us a good overview of all the municipalities, our population projections, our servicing considerations, and one of the main points of this project was to explore regional wastewater management. As I mentioned before, the City of Saskatoon, up until this point, hasn't extended those services beyond their corporate boundaries, and now we're looking to see if it was both financially and technically feasible to extend those services out into the region. So out of the study came a number of recommendations, and one of those key recommendations for the group was to sort of formalize and continue to have these ongoing conversations. Obviously, we had a bit of that through the planning district, but now the time was right to extend that into the rest of the region. So in 2012, in the summer, we started meeting administratively between all the partner municipalities, and it's been sort of due to our efforts and continued discussion that we sort of are here where we are today. So with that, I'm going to ask Dana Kripki to come up and speak a little bit more about some of our initiatives.
We were working on our Planning for Growth project here since actually 2010, and administratively, the 5 municipalities continued to talk. Even though it wasn't a formal process, we felt the need to continue communicating about common issues. And so eventually that led us into a more broader approach at all of the work we were doing, and we decided to kind of collaborate with our Saskatoon Regional Growth on our Saskatoon Regional Growth Summit that we had, as Christine said, a year ago. Our local Regional Economic Development Authority led that for us, and the Planning for Growth group was very directly involved with what was happening at that event. It brought together regional participants to consider and discuss the opportunities for our region specifically. We had about 200 delegates participate, with about 35 municipalities in total, 5 First Nations, several provincial ministries, as well as other provincial agencies like the health region and school boards, local business, industry, and development interests, as well as other several politicians and members from the private sector. And so the summit included speakers from across North America, including the Victoria Capital Regional District, the Edmonton Capital District, Calgary Regional Partnership, Portland Metro Planning and Development, as well as the Niagara region. We also had the pleasure of having Mayor Corrigan speak to our group at the beginning of our summit as well. So these folks brought experience in regional planning, servicing, and governance to identify some of the best practices and lessons learned from others who had been through the process already, and where we recognize that some of our challenges are going to be creating the plan is one thing, implementing it is going to be a different process. And so we were really anxious to learn from what others were experiencing through the implementation or the process of beginning to implement their plans. So the summits gave the participants an opportunity to gain a better understanding of the challenges and benefits related to regional planning, as well as the different models that might be out there. As I think we've heard already this morning, regional planning is not a one-size-fits-all. And so at our summit, we looked to try and gain some insight into 4 key questions. As you can see, they're up on the board. And so we really looked to more clearly define what our region is and who might benefit from participating in this process was kind of the bigger question. We looked at what the principles were, which perhaps we should look at for developing the regional plan, as well as the terms of reference, and also what expectations for deliverables and outcomes there were out there, and the time frame for doing that work. From the summit, we created a summary document which included the 4 general themes that we discovered through going through all of the comments that people submitted. Basically, we were looking at taking advantage of the timing, as we thought it was really important to see the opportunity to gain the momentum from the work we'd already done. We identified the necessity for the 5 municipalities to take the lead on this initiative and not wait for others perhaps to do it for us. To act incrementally and with purpose and resolve, and understanding that there's common value in going through these processes, and by doing so we could set milestones to achieve goals and also keep communications ongoing. The resulting summit and the recommendations that came out of that document actually worked as the catalyst for formalizing the regional relationship as it is today, and the creation of the Saskatoon North Partnership for Growth, as well as a broader regional committee that Christine is going to talk a little more about later. And so we've been very busy since the summit. Most of our time has been spent developing what we call our foundational documents. And so building on the outcomes of the summit, and in order to help establish a framework for regional plan, we created a set of high-level guiding documents for the planning for growth. These included a terms of reference, a work plan, a communications and engagement strategy, as well as a budget. Just in May and June of this year, all 5 municipal councils have endorsed these documents. So just a little bit about what those documents entailed. Our terms of reference mainly identifies the creation of 2 subcommittees within our group, one with elected representation and the other with administrative representation. It also sets out the scope, duties, membership, and voting structure of each of those committees. Within our work plan, we outlined the tasks necessary for completing the plan. One of the things that Rebecca has already mentioned, an interim development strategy, is something we're going to focus on right away to help us deal with those high-pressure areas, particularly on the urban fringes. Ahead of the work that's going to be done on the regional plan, we recognize that we need to still consider the economic opportunity and not miss out. So that work's ongoing. As well, we're going to develop a regional land use map that's tied to infrastructure and servicing. And one of the things I'm most looking forward to is implementing a framework that includes governance structure that we can possibly use in the future. So we're also going to have a fairly in-depth communication and engagement strategy that our consultants will be taking a large role in. It outlines key stakeholders, includes First Nations and landowners, and a variety of other groups and people interested in the process, as well as several options on how we might go about communicating our project. Our budget was also another document that we identified, and it indicates that we need $926,000 to produce a regional plan. And so, as I mentioned before, terms of reference that we did identifies 2 main committees that will be responsible for the planning for growth as it exists. And so our first committee is the Regional Oversight Committee, or ROC as we like to call it. Sorry, we borrowed your name. consisting of elected representatives from each of the municipalities in the Planning for Growth group. This group meets at least quarterly or as needed, and I believe we've had them meet 3 times already, I think, thus far. And so what we've asked of them is that they provide direction to those of us on the administrative side of things, and also to represent their respective councils at the same time. And so the membership of that group includes mayors and reeve of each of the municipalities, as well as 2 other elected officials. Our second committee is the Planning and Administrative Committee, which Rebecca and I are both members of. We have up to 3 representatives from each administration, which includes professional planners or administrators. As well, we have an advisory representative from SRETA. So as we've mentioned, we've been meeting monthly or more often as we're working through some of these documents. And we continue to work on a consensus basis. It's worked for us so far, so why change to something different? This group will be leading the development of the regional plan, so we're going to have a pretty important job to do over the next year and a half. And so out of our foundational documents, we've identified some guiding principles. Well, as you can read them on the board, I'll just give you a little more information on what we see those to be. So being inclusive and respectful, we hope that we can facilitate regional cooperation on all issues of development and the collective growth of the region, as it's deemed to be beneficial for the overall and well-being of the region itself. To embrace diversity, acknowledge that individual interests will vary, encourage regional thinking to consider these in a way to achieve benefit for the region as a whole. To plan for the future, maximize opportunities for cooperation, being prepared will better position the region for growth opportunities and economic prosperity. To communicate and engage, to foster openness and trust in all forms of communication and provide support to one another to have a better success at developing the regional plan. To proceed incrementally and voluntarily, work together with a common purpose, and we're focusing on some smaller items which will help validate the process and be of interest and benefit to the membership as a whole. Our map doesn't look very good, I'm sorry. There should be some blue around the outside of it. Can you somehow fix that? It's missing the main component, so sorry about that. It's coming. A little more. Okay, that'll work. Thank you very much. Okay, so anyway, what I wanted to point out is we have a study area which includes all of our municipalities. It's the 4 urban municipalities, as already mentioned, and the entire planning district, which is outlined by that solid blue line. Kind of where this came from, it was a bit sensitive. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. What was happening, so much growth pressure in the area and accelerated growth rates of some of our communities to the north really made it apparent that we needed to take a firm stance on exploring things on a broader regional perspective. And so the city took the initiative, popular or not, and created this map. What it ended up identifying, it's been changed somewhat since we first introduced it, but the idea was to provide a conceptual look of what this area might look like when it grows to 1 million people. And so the area that I asked for to be highlighted, which is green, I don't know if you can tell if it's green or not, and the dark green areas around Corman and Martinsville represent that area of approximately 1 million people. We do expect that this area will yet be more refined by our consultant as we keep working through our regional plan. So that's it for me, and I'm going to turn it back to Christine to wrap things up.
All right. So in July of this year is when I arrived on the scene. This was after the foundational documents had all been endorsed by the 5 partner municipalities in May and June. We did put out a proposal on SAS Tenders to hire a consultant to help us with the development of the regional plan. It actually went up onto SAS Tenders on July 4th. So there's a lot of happy July 4th, here it goes. See what happens. Both the position of project manager and the regional plan, as Dana mentioned, are funded by the 5 municipalities. So that means my position is funded by 5 municipalities. So if you're ever having a rough day with your boss, just think I have 5 of them. And the regional plan we anticipate will be completed by June 2016, and all 5 of the partners have committed to funding until that date. So, on October 23rd, we proudly announced that O2 Planning and Design were the selected consultants for the regional plan. Doug and Andrew are both in the room. Stand up, take a bow. So Doug is the project director for our regional plan process, and Andrew is the project manager. And O2 has a breadth of experience around working with regional plans, including working with the Calgary Partnership and the South Saskatchewan, which is actually around Lethbridge in southern Alberta. So we're quite excited to be working with them. And the picture here is actually a picture from our press conferences. All 4 mayors and the Reeve, along with our independent chair for the ROC, Alex Fallon, who is also the CEO of Shreda. And we just had them sign a document indicating the date that everybody endorsed the documents or the foundational documents. Hang on. So Dana did touch briefly on the elements of the regional plan, so I won't belabor this. Really, these are all of the elements that will be included in the regional plan once it is complete and we get through the process through the next year and a half. So Dana did mention a couple of other committees that exist. These are sort of outside of the scope of what P4G is, but still definitely related. The broader regional committee, or the BRC as we call them, this is a group that is led by Shreda. The current membership is about 10 municipalities and 7 First Nations. Everybody within the Shreda region, which actually extends well beyond the boundaries of the P4G region, that the study area that Dana showed you on her slide, is invited to these meetings. It is a voluntary membership. This group started shortly after the regional summit. They've met a handful of times since. Really, the point of this group right now is knowledge exchange to get to know each other. A lot of these different groups have keen development interests, and so it's really to talk about those and how these groups can work together going forward. And this is, of course, a group that we will be engaging as part of our regional plan process as well. First Nations and P4G, and you've heard a lot of discussion about First Nations this morning. This is definitely another group that we work with, and they will be engaged in the regional plan process as we go forward. As Rebecca talked about, they have been engaged through the concept plan process, and we do have 11 First Nations in the Saskatoon region that we are working with, and many of them also have keen development interests very close to the urban areas as well, so we want to make sure they are engaged through our regional planning process as we go forward. And just a couple of other quick mentions of other regional partnerships that exist. And we just wanted to talk about these because they're really reflective of the regional partnerships that exist in the Saskatoon region, and they show a lot of the regional cooperation that exists and the efficiencies that can be created when you do work on a regional basis. So we have the Opimihaw Creek Watershed Association. This is a group of 5 municipalities. Some of them are P4G municipalities, but not all. This group was formed in 2012, and right now they have $1 million in funding to do a master drainage plan. Obviously, drainage being a big issue up in our area as it is in many other parts of Saskatchewan. There's also the North Corman Park District Development Appeals Board. This group really came together for a volume reason. A number of the smaller municipalities don't receive a lot of appeals, and so they were finding it difficult to have a development appeals board that was really skilled in being able to deal with appeals as they went forward. So this is a group that came together to allow the 6 municipalities involved, again, some of the P4G municipalities, some of them not, to really be able to deal with appeals with more of a skilled development appeals board, because they all have to deal with them. So instead of going to each municipality, if somebody wants to appeal something, they'll deal through this appeals board. And then finally, just a couple of quick other partnerships that exist, a lot of similar types of partnerships that you heard about this morning. Water. The city of Saskatoon sells water to Sask Water, which is then distributed throughout the region and all the way out to Humboldt, actually. Other examples would be emergency services. There's shared emergency services such as fire or police. Waste. Mayor Corrigan talked a little bit about waste this morning, and our landfills and whatnot do receive waste from landowners who are outside of perhaps a municipality that the landfill is actually within. And then, of course, transportation. Right now, the Ministry of Infrastructure and Highways let's get it right, is working on a transportation demand model for the Saskatoon region. And this will lead to a lot of other transportation types of initiatives. The transportation demand model is looking at a study area that is actually the entire Saskatoon CMA plus Aberdeen, so that is beyond the P4G boundaries, but P4G is keenly involved in this, and we're quite excited to see what comes out of it. We do have a perimeter highway that we've been waiting for patiently up around Saskatoon, so we're hoping that drives some of the initiative around that as well. And finally, just some benefits and challenges, and then I'll throw it back to Dan and Rebecca to talk about some of the urban and rural perspectives from their perspective. Nothing you haven't heard this morning, the benefits of regional partnerships, sustainable growth, greater certainty for investors. And Shrita is definitely a key player in being part of the advisory group on our P4G committees, and they remind us continuously that this work is important to keep drawing those investors to the Saskatoon region, to give them those certainties that they need so that they come to the region. Obviously, efficient regional servicing, and Dana and Rebecca both spoke about that in their presentations. Speaking as one voice for the region, whenever we have an ask, for example, if there is an opportunity to change legislation or whatever it might be, if we can speak together and create an understanding rather than speaking opposite each other, it definitely is a benefit. And then building trust. I mean, the old sayings are true. It takes forever to build trust and 1 second to break it. So we definitely keep building trust the more work we do together. Some of the challenges for us, governance obviously. Right now, the regional plan that we're building is based on a model of the bottom-up approach where all the municipalities are coming together to create this. And governance will be a piece that we'll be looking at as we move forward with our regional plan. Political will to plan. We definitely have the support of our regional, or the politicians within our regional P4G area to work forward through our ROC, and we do keep them engaged throughout the process. And funding. Who pays for this? Right now, the 5 municipalities in P4G are paying for the regional plan to be developed, and then we'll be looking at how this goes forward through the regional plan process. And then the legislative tools. Does the legislation give us the ability to do what we would like and what we want to do as a region as we move forward? And we'll be working through all of these challenges as we go forward. And now I will pass it back over to Dana, who will talk a little bit about the urban perspective of the regional planning process.
So, I just wanted to add a little bit of information on the regional plan from the urban perspective. Is there's some kind of key things that we need to focus on as the big urban municipality out of the 5. Key for everyone involved, actually, balancing the interests and needs of both municipalities, whether they're rural or urban, depending on where you are, whether it's the RM in Martinsville or Osler to Corman or whatever the case may be. Accommodating the ability for the cities to be able to grow is very important, but we still need to consider the opportunity for the RM to grow. Although they can't grow physically, they would still like to increase their tax base and improve their own opportunities. So increasing development pressures and land use competition at the rural and urban interface continues to occur as we're working through this process and will increase over time and eventually expand well out into the region. We need to be prepared for that so that we can provide that certainty to the business community. Needs for services beyond city limits and determining how these should be built and funded is going to be a challenge. We recently are exploring memo of understanding with the City of Martinsville, looking at possibly being able to connect some regional wastewater management with them. So that's kind of the City of Saskatoon's first step in that direction. So we'll be looking to see how that unfolds, and perhaps we can use that as a model going forward. Just in wrap up from my perspective, with increasing demand and cost to supply services to citizens throughout the region, working from a regional perspective will help achieve this growth in a more sustainable and cost-efficient manner. Thank you.
So saving the best for last, we'll talk a little bit about the rural perspective. For the RM, all 4 urban municipalities are bounded by Corman Park. So obviously we need to work closely with these municipalities to have an understanding of their growth plans. There's an increasing development pressures on that rural-urban interface. So having those open lines of communication and working together are going to be key moving forward. We need to ensure that there's no surprises for other municipality, whether it's rural or urban, on future planning within the region.